Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, as you have possibly guessed from the title and the thumbnail, I am going to be ranking and reviewing all of Ruth Ware's books. So Ruth Ware is one of my favourite authors, and earlier this year I set myself a challenge to read her entire backlist. I think at the start of this year I'd read most of her newer releases, but I hadn't read many of her earlier books, including her debut, so I wanted to rectify that, which I have now done. There are 8 books that I'm going to be talking about in this video. Apparently she also published a short novella a few years ago, which I haven't read, so I'm not going to be counting that. But at the time that I'm filming this, she has 8 full-length published novels, and yeah, I'm excited to talk about these because some of them I really loved and some of them I didn't love so much. It's really interesting actually how that happens with my favourite authors. I always seem to have mixed opinions on them. I think it's also really important to mention that I think Ruth Ware in general is a really clever mystery writer. So sometimes her books are categorised as thrillers, and I do think that some of her books have more thrilling elements than others, but I much prefer her mystery writing. I think she's just very clever at writing atmosphere and building tension, and surprising me, some of her books have really good twists that I did not see come in. But yeah, we're gonna start at the bottom and then work our way up. We're gonna kick things off with The Lying Game, which was actually the last book that I read by her, as in I read it a few months ago, and that's what prompted me to then make this video. But yeah, unfortunately this is going at the bottom of the list. I was not the biggest fan of this, clearly. I gave it 2 stars, and that was mostly because it didn't do anything that I actively hated, but I just found it really boring. So this is following a main character called Issa or Isa? I can't remember actually how to pronounce her name. It does actually say in the book how to pronounce the main character's name, but she is in her late 20s, I think. She's married with a young baby, and she receives this phone call from Kate, I think is her name. And Kate was one of her best friends when she was in school. So when she was a teenager, she attended this elite boarding school in this small coastal town, and she had this close friendship group where they would play this game called The Lying Game. So they would lie to people and see how far they could take it, and they would earn points based on whether people believed the lies that they were telling. So yeah, the main character and her other friends receive a phone call from this woman Kate, who was all of their friend back in school, and she has something really urgent that she needs to tell them, but she can only tell them in person. So she brings the friendship group back together. Kate actually lives in the town where they went to school, and yeah, they all travel back there, and I don't know how much to say and what would be considered a spoiler, but basically nothing interesting happened in this book. There is kind of a mystery, but the mystery just wasn't that interesting, and I felt like there was so much other stuff going on, and I think this had potential to be really good. I really liked the past timeline where they were actually at school, but that didn't last that long. I just found that the further that I got into the book, the more and more bored I felt. The stakes should have felt higher than they actually did, I think is the best way to explain it. I do think that Ruth Ware is really good at writing settings, so I did feel like I was there in this small coastal town, but overall this was a bit of a miss for me, and like I said, I gave it 2 stars overall. Next up we have The Death of Mrs Westway, which has an interesting premise, but I think there were more interesting directions that the plot could have gone in. So this is following a main character called Hal, who lives in a seaside town and works as a tarot tarot card reader. So she runs this booth on this pier, and she's not actually psychic. She is a fraud, but she is also desperate for money. So you can imagine her surprise when she receives a letter in the post telling her that she has inherited a small fortune from this woman called Mrs Westway, and Hal is confused because she is pretty sure that she's not related to this Mrs Westway, and she assumes that it's a mistake, but she decides to go along with it because of her financial situation. And yeah, this is all about Hal travelling to meet this family, and secrets from the past are revealed. That's all I'm gonna say. I felt like I spent this whole book waiting for it to get interesting, and it never did. I liked the atmosphere, and I think I said this earlier, but I do think that Ruth Ware is really good at grounding you within a setting and making you feel like you're there, especially because this takes place in a seaside town. I felt like I was in this seaside town, but overall it was really frustrating because I thought this could have been so much better than it actually was, and I ended up giving this, I think, 3 stars overall. It felt kind of average to me. Wouldn't go out of my way to recommend it, but also I wouldn't put anyone off from picking this up. I actually think if you go into it without any expectations, then you might end up enjoying it more than I did, because this was, I think, the 3rd or 4th book that I read by Ruth Ware, and it wasn't as good as the other books that I'd already read from her. In 6th place, we have In a Dark, Dark Wood, which I think I gave 3 stars. I enjoyed it slightly more than The Lying Game and The Death of Mrs Westway, but it also, again, felt kind of average. This follows a woman called Lenora who is invited to attend this hen do. So a hen do is basically what we call a bachelorette party in the UK, and she's invited to go away on this weekend. It's her best friend from school who's getting married, and our main character is a little bit confused because she hasn't spoke to this woman since they were teenagers, so she's not really sure why she's invited, but she kind of agrees to go. Like, another friend is also attending and talks her into it. Again, I really liked the setting in this because this hen weekend is taking place in this massive house in the countryside, like on the edge of these woods, and it was a really creepy and atmospheric location. I really liked the setting, and I liked the setup for this book. I thought it was gonna go really well. It was intriguing, but also it was a little bit tedious. It felt like it was taking forever to get to the point. The way that it's written is that the main characters know of something that happened in their pasts, but you are kept in the dark as the reader, and it did reach a point where I thought, come on, just tell us what's going on. So yeah, I liked it. I just wanted it to get to the point a lot quicker than it actually did. Also, there was a lot of toxicity in this. Like, the characters were not great, and it was a little frustrating to read. It was okay. Like, the ending gripped me, and I did like how the tension really ramped up, but I think I gave this one 3 stars. I might have said that already. Next up we have One by One, which is a traditional murder mystery with an isolated setting. So this takes place in a ski resort. We're following 2 main characters and 2 different points of view. The first character is a woman who works in this ski resort as a chalet host, and then we're also following one of the guests. So this is about a group of work colleagues. I think actually the main character no longer works for this company, but we're following a group of characters who are on this team building day. Not even a day, it's a weekend, but they're at this ski resort for team building, and yeah, they may or may not end up being picked off one by one, hence the title. I did really like this. I actually buddy read this, and I think it's a really good book to buddy read or to read as part of a group, because there's a lot that you can theorise on, I guess because it's a closed circle murder mystery. There is a lot that you can discuss. Also, I think this would be a really good book to read in the winter. I can't remember what time of year I read this, but yeah, I think this would be a good book to cozy up and read in front of the fire. I think I've seen mixed reviews for this, and maybe it is because it heavily leans more mystery than thriller. The ending wasn't perfect. I felt like it dragged and it was a little longer than it needed to be, but I otherwise felt on the edge of my seat at times while I was reading this. There were some really good moments of tension and suspense, and yeah, it is one that I would recommend if you like that kind of mystery. Next up we have Ruth Ware's most recent release, which is 0 Days. This came out a couple of months ago, and it has a very different vibe to Ruth Ware's other books because it was very fast-paced and action-packed and adrenaline-fueled, and I liked it for what it was, but I prefer her other style of books where they're more gothic and slower paced and mysterious. I mean, this does still have a mystery, I suppose. We're basically following this main character called Jack, who is a pen tester, and this is actually a real job. So she works with her husband, and they are hired on behalf of companies to test out their security. So Jack is actually on the ground breaking into buildings and trying to get around their security teams, and then her husband works on the computer and does something similar, except he's trying to hack in digitally. At the start of the book, something goes wrong with their most recent assignment, and Jack ends up going on the run because she has been accused of murder. And yeah, like I said, this was very fast paced, and it was a good time because every time I picked it up, I wanted to keep on reading. It's one of those books where I think you could finish it in one sitting if you wanted to. The issue that I had is that there were some moments where I felt like I was having to really suspend disbelief, and I can suspend disbelief a certain amount, especially with a story like this where we're essentially following a fugitive on the run. Like, if I was watching this as a movie, I don't think I would really question it, but yeah, in book format it wasn't that satisfying to read. And yeah, in general I thought the ending to this could have been more satisfying. I didn't really love the way that things were wrapped up, but I do tend to like books that focus purely on one character and what they're doing, and it was a fun time. I think I gave this either 3.5 stars or maybe 4 stars. So we're now getting into the top 3, and in third place we have The Woman in Cabin 10, which is another more traditional murder mystery, only this time it's set on a boat. So this is following a main character who's a journalist or a writer, I can't remember which, but she writes within the travel industry, and at the start of the book she's given this opportunity to go on the launch of this luxury cruise, which I think is heading to the Norwegian fjords. When she arrives on board, she's assigned to this cabin, which isn't actually cabin number 10. She's assigned to the room next door to cabin 10, and I think she realises that she's forgotten her mascara or some makeup of some kind, and she goes next door and knocks on the door, and this woman answers and lends her what she needs. Later that evening, after the initial welcome meal, she is woken in the middle of the night because she hears something going overboard on the balcony next door to hers, and she thinks it sounds like a body, which is obviously very creepy. However, when she raises it with the crew, they tell her that no one is staying in the room next to her and that none of the passengers are missing. So yeah, we're essentially following her as she's trying to solve this mystery and work out what's going on, but she's not the most reliable narrator. She was drinking the night that this all happened, and also she's trying to process something traumatic that happened to her before the start of the cruise. This was such a clever mystery. I could not work out or predict what direction this went in, but it felt so satisfying. Like, I love it in a mystery where you're really confused, but then the reveals start happening and it all makes complete sense, and it makes you want to go back and reread the book because you can't believe that you missed it. I thought that the suspense in this was fantastic and the tension was built up really well. The only reason I gave this 4 stars instead of 5 stars is because I felt like the ending could have been stronger. So in second place we have a book that I was tempted to put in first place. I really struggled with first and second place because I really enjoyed both of these books. However, I think there was one that I had less criticism of. So in second place we have The It Girl, which I actually read an arc of before it came out. I think this came out last year. This was pitched as a dark academia mystery, and I went into it without any real expectations other than having read and enjoyed other Ruth Ware books. I went into this having not seen any other reviews really, apart from like other early ARC reviews, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4.5 stars, I think. This follows a main character called Hannah, and there are 2 timelines that you're following. Hannah in the past as a university student starting at Oxford, and also Hannah in the present day where she's now in her late 20s or early 30s, and she's married and pregnant, expecting her first child. When Hannah was 18 and attending Oxford University, her roommate April was murdered, and in the present day she's just found out that the guy who was sent to prison for April's murder has died in prison. So Hannah is ready to put the past behind her and finally move on. However, a journalist then approaches her and claims to have evidence that this guy that was convicted was actually innocent. So we're following Hannah as she's trying to confront her past and work out what actually happened back then. And then we're also following this past timeline where we're seeing Hannah and April become friends, and we're seeing the very close friendship group that they formed. The biggest complaint that I've seen for this is that it's too long, and I do agree. I don't think it needed to be as long as it was. I think you could have shaved off around 50 to 100 pages and it would have made the pacing a little bit tighter, but there was something about this book that I really enjoyed. I think that Ruth Ware nailed the atmosphere, especially in the past timeline where it's this university setting. I loved how we were exploring this very complicated friendship group, and honestly I was getting a headache from trying to work out what was going to happen. Again, it was just a very cleverly done mystery. So yeah, I can understand why this didn't work for some people and why some people found it too slow or not exciting enough, but honestly I kind of liked that. I really just loved the atmosphere, and that's why it's one of my favourite books by Ruth Ware. So that does mean that my favourite book by Ruth Ware is actually the first book that I read by Ruth Ware, and I wonder whether that has something to do with it, but my favourite book by Ruth Ware is The Turn of the Key, which I still, even to this day, keep recommending to people because I read this in one sitting. As soon as I picked it up, I was hooked, and the atmosphere and the tension, I was genuinely scared while reading this. So in this book, we are following a main character, and it's written as if this main character is in prison and she is writing to a lawyer begging for help because she insists that she is innocent of what she's been accused of. She accepts that she wasn't perfect and she did some things wrong, but she is not guilty of the reason why she's in prison. She then starts recounting her story and talking about how she accepted this job working for a family in the Scottish Highlands in this smart home. So this massive grand building, like I feel like you can almost picture it, but she was hired as a nanny and it seemed like this job was too good to be true. However, not long after she started, pretty much straight away, she very quickly learned that the children that she was meant to be looking after were not as perfect as the parents tried to imply. And also there is something very creepy going on in this house. It has that trope of, is there something paranormal going on or is there a different explanation? And I just love books like that. I loved how creepy and unsettling this was. I've also heard the audiobook is really good because they use like sound effects and stuff. The only reason I can see people not loving this book is because of the ending, and I can't say anything about it because I don't want to go into spoilers, but the ending to this is quite polarising. I loved the ending, but I can see why some people didn't, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. I have recommended this book to so many people since I read it, and I will continue to recommend it because it is not just my favourite Ruth Ware book, it's one of my favourite mystery thrillers of all time. So that does bring me to the end of this video. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of Ruth Ware's books and how you would rate them, whether you have a favourite Ruth Ware book. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me, but otherwise I will see you next time. Bye!